battlefield. My name is Sophia, and this story starts on what was supposed to be one of the happiest days of my life, my wedding day. I remember waking up that morning feeling a weird mix of excitement and apprehension. I took a deep breath, thinking that any jitteriness I felt was just pre-wedding nerves. Every bride has them, right? I had met Danielle 2 years earlier at a mutual friend's party. He was charming, seemed caring, and was good-looking enough to be the man I pictured standing next to me at the altar. We dated, fell in love, or at least I thought we did, and when he proposed, I said yes, thinking I was securing a future filled with love and companionship. However, when I walked down the aisle in my cream, white gown, adorned with delicate lace and a trail that seemed to stretch for miles, I felt a coldness coming from Danielle. His eyes didn't sparkle when he looked at me. His face was stern, almost disinterested. It felt as if he was merely fulfilling an obligation rather than marrying the woman he loved. When the vows were exchanged, Danielle's were devoid of emotion. I, Danielle, take you, Sophia, to be my lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, he recited mechanically. It was a stark contrast to the tremor of emotion in my voice when it was my turn. Then came the reception, and with it, the unveiling of Carol, Danielle's mother, dressed as if she was the one getting married. Carol wasted no time showing her true colors. "Oh, Sophia, your dress is interesting. A little too flashy for my taste, though." She smirked as she greeted me. "Thank you, Carol. I always valued diverse opinions," I replied, choking back my surprise and disappointment. "Of course you do, dear. And this food? Was it catered from a food truck?" She taunted openly. "No, Carol. It's from one of the best catering services in the city," Danielle interjected, but his voice lacked any firmness or the support I so desperately needed. "Oh, Danielle, don't be so defensive. I'm just concerned about the choices Sophia is making. After all, she's family now, unfortunately." Carol sneered, her eyes meeting mine with a challenge. In that moment, standing in a hall filled with joyous faces and flying bouquets, I felt isolated. I looked at Danielle for some kind of emotional support or reassurance, but he remained quiet, almost as if he agreed with his mother's cruel assessments. That night, as I lay next to Danielle in our wedding suite, a promise formulated in my mind. This cannot be my life. I won't allow myself to be belittled and marginalized in my own story. I will find a way to regain my dignity, even if it means going to war with the family I just married into. Little did I know then how prescient that silent promise would be, how it would guide my actions in the days that were about to unfold, days that would test my patience, my resolve, and ultimately my understanding of what it means to stand up for myself. We moved into my house after the wedding, a place I had invested in, making it into a comfortable sanctuary long before Danielle entered my life. It was a charming 3-bedroom home with a garden filled with roses and a kitchen that would make any home chef weep with joy. I always thought of it as my little fortress against the world, a place where love and care should flourish. But the home I once considered a sanctuary soon turned into a battlefield. I immersed myself in my work, eager to climb the corporate ladder. I was a key account manager in a prestigious multinational company. The job was demanding, but I loved it and was pretty darn good at it too. On the other hand, Danielle worked a mundane 9-to-5 job as an office worker. He contributed to the household, sure, but it was my income that primarily fueled our lifestyle. I was fine with that. In love and in marriage, you don't keep score. At least, that's what I thought. But Carol seemed hell-bent on tipping the scales. "Oh, Sophia, how many hours did you say you work a week?" Carol asked, perusing my immaculately decorated living room one evening. She was visiting us, again, and had settled herself comfortably on the plush sofa as if she owned the place. "About 50 to 60, depending on the workload," I replied, trying to maintain a polite smile. "How dreadful. No wonder you have no time to cook a decent meal. Ready-made meals and takeout? Really? Is that how you plan on taking care of my son?" Danielle, sitting next to her, chimed in. "Mom, it's not a big deal. Sophia works hard, but not at being a good wife, apparently." Carol shot back, unfazed by her son's meager attempt at defending me. Mom knows best. Danielle sighed, resigning himself to his mother's point of view. That was it. That was his defense. A feeble acceptance of his mother's toxic behavior. He didn't even look at me, and it was like a stab to my already wounded heart. The visits became more frequent and more unbearable. With each visit, Carol's criticisms became bolder, and Danielle's defense weaker. It was as if Carol was marking her territory, slyly claiming bits and pieces of my home and converting them into her fiefdom. She had an opinion about everything, from the color of our curtains to the brand of milk in our refrigerator. You should switch to organic, she'd declare, examining the grocery items as if they were contaminated. It's better for you, but of course you wouldn't know that, would you? I think I know how to grocery shop. Carol, I've been doing it for years without any problems, I'd retort. Oh, but there's always room for improvement, isn't there? She'd reply, a sugary sweetness coating her venomous words. Every corner of my own home started feeling like a trap. I felt scrutinized in the place that should have been my sanctuary. The home that I had built on my sweat and perseverance felt like it was being ripped away from me, piece by piece. It was clear that Carol was not just a guest, making occasional appearances. She was becoming a persistent invader in my life, aided and abetted by her own son, my husband. And so the nightmare deepened, the cold walls of my own home closing in on me as I began to realize that something had to give. I couldn't go on living like this, walking on eggshells in my own sanctuary. The promise I had made to myself on my wedding night echoed in my ears, growing louder with each passing day, fueling my resolve for what would come next. Things had to change, that much was clear. Driven by my escalating discontent, I threw myself into my work even more passionately. I took on extra projects, brokered critical deals, and in a few months, I managed to save enough for a beautiful villa, a lifelong dream that was finally within my grasp. It's the perfect place for us to start fresh, I told Danielle, showing him pictures of the luxurious villa, complete with a swimming pool, a state of art kitchen, and a panoramic view that could make anyone forget their troubles, at least for a moment. It looks great, Sophia, he said half-heartedly, his attention barely leaving his phone. I was willing to overlook his lukewarm response, attributing it to stress or preoccupation. I had even started entertaining the naive hope that this new setting could be a catalyst for change, a chance to redefine the boundaries of our relationship and our family dynamics. The villa became my new project, a representation of the better life I was determined to create. We moved in, and for a few weeks, life seemed idyllic. The change of scenery appeared to have a positive effect on our relationship. Carol's visits had dwindled, and Danielle seemed more engaged. It felt like a brand new chapter in our lives, a reset that we both desperately needed. But then, the illusion shattered. Carol showed up at our villa one day, suitcase in tow, and declared, "This place is marvelous. It'll be a pleasure living here." "I'm sorry, what?" I stammered, incredulous. "I've decided to move in with you two," she announced as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "That's out of the question," I asserted, my voice tinged with disbelief and rising anger. "Danielle," Carol turned to her son. "Aren't you going to say something?" Without meeting my eyes, Danielle spoke. "Mom has a point. She's getting older, and it would be good for her to be around family." "But this is my house," I protested. "I paid for it. I get a say in who lives here." "Come on, Sophia. She's my mother," Danielle reasoned, finally locking eyes with me, as if that would magically make me acquiesce. It was the breaking point. Not just the audacity of Carol to assume she could invade my sanctuary once again, but Danielle's unwillingness to stand up for me, for us, in our home. It was as if he was openly declaring his allegiance, and it wasn't to his wife. Later, at a family breakfast, a mockery of the word family, if ever there was one, Carol slapped a piece of paper on the dining table. "I've made a list of house rules. Sophia, I expect you to follow them to the letter." I stared at the list, then back at Carol, and finally at Danielle. He said nothing, silently endorsing this farce of a family meeting, and it was in that moment that I realized how profoundly alone I was in this marriage, in this house, my house. Enough. I said, pushing back my chair and standing up. This isn't just a house. This is my home. I bought it, I pay for it, and I will not be dictated to in my own home, especially not by someone who contributes nothing but negativity. You can't talk to my mother like that, Danielle yelled, getting up. And then, without warning, he did the unthinkable. He punched me in the face. The room went silent. My cheeks stung, my eyes filled with tears, not from the pain, but from the sheer betrayal. I had reached my breaking point. I can't do this anymore, I choked out, my voice a low whisper. I grabbed my purse and my car keys, left the dining room, and walked out of the villa, my vision blurred, but my resolve crystal clear. As I drove back to my old house, my thoughts were a swirling storm of emotion and determination, but through it all, one thing stood out, the promise I made to myself. It was time to act on it, and God help anyone who stood in my way. The stage was set for my reckoning, and I was more than ready to rewrite the script of my life, whatever the cost. I returned to my old house, a place that once felt like an incomplete jigsaw puzzle, each piece representing dreams deferred for the sake of a marriage that had turned into a mirage. But it still had some vestiges of the woman I used to be, the woman I was determined to become again. I looked around, taking in the framed photographs and cherished mementos, stark reminders of a life I had left behind. Each item seemed to scream, "This is who you are, Sophia. Don't forget." Sitting at the wooden desk in the corner of my old bedroom, my eyes caught a stack of papers, a project I had long neglected. It was a financial plan, detailing future investments and wealth growth, initially designed for Danielle and me. I pushed it aside. Instead, I took a blank sheet of paper and started writing my own list. A list unlike Carol's, one born out of self-respect rather than tyranny. Rule own. No more compromises on self-respect, I wrote. I paused, realizing that putting it in ink made it real, irrevocable. Just then, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Danielle. "Sophia, we need to talk." I looked at the message but didn't respond immediately. My thoughts shifted back to Carol's list, the absurd rules she had crafted in an attempt to dominate my home, my sanctuary. Rule 2, always stand your ground. The phone buzzed again, another text from Danielle. "I'm sorry, can we please talk?" I looked at those words, "I'm sorry," and for a brief moment I questioned my resolve. Could those words mend a fractured marriage? Could they erase the years of humiliation and the punch that had finally shattered any illusion of love? I returned to my list. Rule L3, an apology without change is manipulation. Enough time had passed for a reply. I picked up the phone and texted back. "There's nothing left to talk about." I continued writing my rules, pouring every ounce of my reclaimed autonomy into them. Rule after rule, they became not just sentences on paper, but pledges to myself, a manifesto of the new life I was scripting. Rule 4, financial independence is non-negotiable. Rule 5, anyone who undermines you has no place in your life. Rule 6, don't look back, you're not going that way. And finally, Rule 7, never let anyone define who you are. I put the pen down, leaning back in my chair, my eyes drawn to that pivotal Rule 7. Carol had tried to define me as a failure of a wife, as an extension of her son, as an intruder in my own home. Even Danielle had his definitions. Malleable Sophia, yielding Sophia, the Sophia who would eventually comply and fold. They were all wrong. The only definition that mattered was the one I gave myself. The Sophia who would no longer bow, the Sophia who had had enough. It was my life, my rules. With renewed clarity, I picked up my phone and dialed a number I had known all my life but hadn't dialed in ages. My father's. It was time to bring in reinforcements, to finally level the playing field. As the line buzzed, awaiting my father's voice, my eyes returned to my list of rules. The rules were non-negotiable because, finally, they were mine and mine alone. And anyone who couldn't abide by them had no place in my life. Not anymore. I was rewriting the narrative. One rule, one choice, one stand at a time. And this time, I was authoring my own destiny. My father's voice resonated with warmth and concern as he picked up the phone. "Sophia, Is everything all right? Dad, we need to talk, I said, skipping the formalities. I laid it all bare, the years of emotional neglect, the humiliation from Carol, and the violent crescendo with Danielle. My father listened, absorbing each word with a heaviness that felt like a long overdue validation of my struggles. I'm so sorry, Sophia, he said finally. What do you want to do? I want justice, Dad, and I know exactly how to get it. That's how my father became my ally, in a revenge plot that was surgical in its precision. My father, being the supervisor at the company where Danielle worked, had just the right amount of influence to make things difficult for him. It was a phone call, a meeting, and a quick signature. That's all it took for Danielle to lose his job, a termination citing ethical issues that would taint his professional future. When Danielle received the news, he called me immediately, voice trembling with a mix of anger and disbelief. Sophia, did you have anything to do with this? Remember the time you chose your mother's tyranny over my dignity? This is me, choosing myself, I said coldly. You can't be serious. You're ruining my life. No, Danielle, you did that all by yourself the moment you raised your hand on me. I could hear him take a deep breath, as if bracing himself for what was to come. I need that job. Sophia, you have to fix this. And why would I do that? I asked, barely masking the satisfaction in my voice. For us, Sophia, for our marriage. There is no us, Danielle. Not anymore. It was an exhilarating moment, finally wielding the power to give consequences to actions, to tilt the scales back in favor of justice. But I wasn't done yet. My next step was the villa, the symbol of my hard work, my aspirations, and a life that should have been but never was. I consulted my lawyers, had them draw up the divorce papers, and included the stipulation for the ownership of the villa to revert entirely to me. And for good measure, I pressed charges for domestic violence, a little parting gift to remind Danielle of his despicable actions. A month later, the divorce was finalized. The judge had no qualms about awarding me full ownership of the villa and slapping Danielle with a $50,000 fine for domestic abuse. When I returned to what was now unquestionably my home, Carol was waiting there, a disdainful look on her face. You can't kick me out, you know. This is my son's house, she sneered. Actually, this is my house, and I can do exactly that. I handed her the divorce papers, watching her eyes widen as she scanned through the text. But where will we go? She finally stammered. That's not my concern anymore, I said, reveling in the role reversal. It's time for you both to leave. And leave they did. Danielle's face was a mix of disbelief and defeat as he packed his bags, avoiding my eyes. I didn't utter a single word as I watched them go, realizing that silence could sometimes be the most eloquent form of disdain. As the door closed behind them, my eyes returned to my list of rules, now framed and hanging by the entrance, a sentinel guarding my newfound peace. I had taken back control, reclaimed my life, and reset its terms. It was a revenge served cold, meticulously planned and flawlessly executed. But more than revenge, it was a reclaiming of a life that had been overshadowed by betrayal and hurt. From that point on, it was a life led by my rules and nobody else's, and that was the sweetest revenge of all. The house felt different now. Even the air seemed lighter, untainted by the corrosive presence of Danielle and Carol. I took a moment to savor it. The triumph, the relief, the promise of new beginnings. But I knew that this wasn't the end. It was the final act in a drama that had spanned years, and there was still one last scene to play out. Days later, I received a text message from Danielle. Can we meet? There's something I need to tell you. I debated for a few minutes, contemplating whether I should entertain any further dialogue. Ultimately, curiosity got the better of me. Fine, but in a public place, I replied. We met at a cafe, neutral ground, a place neither tainted by memories nor heavy with emotional weight. As I walked in, I spotted Danielle sitting alone, nervously fidgeting with a coffee cup. I sat down across from him. Thank you for coming, Sophia, he started, his voice tinged with a desperation I had never heard before. Don't thank me yet. Why did you call me here? I asked, cutting straight to the chase. He sighed, as though gathering the courage to dive into treacherous waters. I wanted to apologize for everything. I looked at him incredulously. Now you apologize? After you've lost everything? I know it's late, but losing my job, my home, it's made me realize what I've done, how much pain I've caused you. My initial instinct was to hurl back a snide remark, but I restrained myself. Instead, I simply said, I have moved on. Danielle, your apology serves no purpose now. Danielle's face tightened, his eyes moistened. I was hoping, perhaps foolishly, that there might be a way to make things right, a way to start over. The audacity of his proposal stunned me, but as I looked into his eyes, I saw not the confident, domineering man I had once known, but a broken, humbled person. It wasn't enough to elicit sympathy, but it did give me a sense of closure. There's no turning back, Danielle, I said firmly. I gave you chances, I compromised, I tolerated, but you crossed lines that cannot be uncrossed. He nodded, defeated. I just needed to hear it, to know for sure that it's over. It's over, I confirmed. We sat there for a moment, the weight of finality settling over us. Eventually, Danielle rose from his seat. Goodbye, Sophia. Goodbye, Danielle, I responded, watching him walk away. It was the final act, the closing scene, the ultimate period at the end of a long, convoluted sentence. I returned to my car and sat in the driver's seat, feeling a mixture of emotions. Relief, sorrow, but most importantly, freedom. I started the engine and drove back to my home, the place that was once a battlefield but was now, finally, a sanctuary. As I walked through the front door, my eyes fell upon the framed list of rules hanging on the wall. A smile spread across my face. From now on, my life would be governed by those rules, hard-earned lessons forged from years of struggle and a battle finally won. I had been many things in the past, compromising, forgiving, vulnerable, but now, above all, I was resilient. I had faced the tempest, weathered it, and emerged stronger than ever. I took out my phone and deleted Danielle's number, a small but meaningful gesture, severing the last remaining link to a past I was eager to leave behind. Then I opened a new document and started typing, not rules this time, but plans. Plans for the future, dreams to chase, and a life to reclaim. As I typed away, I realized that revenge, while sweet, was not the ultimate goal. It was self-respect, self-worth, and the indomitable spirit to forge ahead no matter the odds. And so, with a heart full of hope and a soul unburdened, I wrote down my dreams, one by one, each a stepping stone to a future unshackled from the past. It was my life, my rules, my final act, and it was only